Hi, everyone. Welcome to our IMI Global Producer webinar series. Today, I have Andy Welch with Welch Cattle Company with me today, and he's just going to talk to us a little bit about their program and what it's like on their operation. So, welcome, Andy. I'm so glad to have you. If
Hi.
you will just please introduce yourself and where you guys are located and how long y'all have been ranching.
Okay. My name is Andy Welch. I manage Welch Cattle Company for my family. I work for my parents and two brothers, Bob and Wesley. My parents' name are John and Bonnie Welch. Our main hub or our main ranch, home ranch, would be in southeast Colorado. We either own or lease 3 or 4 places along Highway 10, which should run between Walsenburg and La Junta, Colorado. We also lease a ranch in West Texas near Post, and another ranch in southeast Montana near a town called Crow Agency. Those are all cow-calf operations, and I have been working for my family since finishing college in 2005.
Wow, so you guys have a lot of territory to keep track of. That's
Yeah, we're in several different climates, so try to have at least one of them getting rain at some point in time. So
yeah, for sure. Well, that's
yep.
kind of nice to be in a little bit different areas and like you said, participation I can imagine is a concern. So that kind of rolls into my next question. What are some of your biggest challenges and how have you learned to overcome and adapt?
Okay. I would say hands down our biggest challenge is weather. Dry conditions have kind of become more the norm than the exception. Seems like, so in my 15 years of managing this ranch and these locations, we've probably been dry more than we've been wet. And so that just makes long-term planning and developing a real identity in your cow herd and your marketing plans difficult, because you kind of never know where you're going to be or where you're going to be moving them to, or even your breeding plans have to shift and adjust when you just don't want to. You think you kind of get a plan on how to really provide a sought after product, and then it just doesn't rain and you're kind of just scrambling to survive. So that's probably our biggest challenge, is just adapting to the climate conditions, and being flexible enough to stay in business without, while still trying to provide a product that's desirable. So that would be our biggest challenge, hands down, is the weather. And then we're pretty blessed. We have good help, good employees, good management, good help underneath me. My family is very supportive of me, and my dad's a great asset in knowledge and expertise. And so the management I feel pretty comfortable with, and the labor has not been an issue for us directly, but I know it is as an industry as a whole. Labor's tough. So.
Wow. Yeah, those are a lot of different factors. Some of those you can control. I mean, labor is sometimes something you can kind of control. Your management style is something you can control, and having that good relationship with everybody who makes all of the ranch work. So all those moving parts. But whether, yeah, that's obviously, unfortunately, something you can't control. So definitely understand that challenge for sure. So where do you guys market your cattle, and how has that marketing option increased your opportunities?
We're pretty diverse in our marketing approach. We have the cattle in Montana are all Wagyu sired. They go directly to a feed yard and source in Idaho. That's a real simple marketing tool there, but we do use Agent Source and NHTC programs on the ranch that help us. Our buyer there prefers that, and so We use IMI for that, and those cattle are really simple to sell. They have been so far. They seem to be sought after, and that we enjoy our relationship with that feed yard and that system. So those cattle go pretty easy. They come right off the cow and go. Our Colorado division, when the weather conditions and the forage conditions allow, we try to wean at least 90 days. And the Colorado division uses Agent Source, All Natural, NHTC, and Beef Care. And so then we try to hold those cattle as long as possible, even hold big steers over till they weigh 8.5 or 9, and market those cattle. And we usually use Superior for that, and that's worked wonderful. As long as we have the forage to get them to that size, that's a great plan. It seems like there's a hole in the market in late spring, early summer for big cattle in programs. So we try to target that. And then the Texas ranch, it's a little different setup, where it's a little more just a commodity product, and those calves, depending on the weather or the conditions, they might go to wheat, or they might get weaned, or they might go right off the cow. They're kind of our flexible herd as far as marketing goes. Some sale barn work on cattle that aren't in programs. We'll try to hit a calf sale or some sort of anniversary sales locally, and markets seem to uptick for those, and so we'll run a load of calves in for something like that. But we really try not to have any real set way that we're stuck marketing cattle. We just try to provide cattle that have lots of options and lots of paths, and we'll do private treaty, we'll do Superior, we'll do sale barns, we rarely feed any cattle, but sometimes we will. So we just try to remain flexible and utilize the programs that we've got them enrolled in to find a source for them.
That's kind of neat. You don't really hear a lot of producers. I mean, I'm sure there are some out there for sure, but having that diverse of a marketing, structure. And it's kind of nice that it's not really a structure. I mean, you made it clear that you guys like to stay fairly flexible, because the markets do change. So, having that flexibility and being able to go a lot of different ways, I think is very important. And so you guys definitely seem to capitalize on that opportunity. So awesome. Andy, you kind of referenced some of the verification programs you guys are involved in. So obviously source and age, non-hormone treated, verified natural, did I hear that? And of course Beef Care. So how long have you guys been doing verification, and what do you feel is currently or has been the greatest benefit of doing verification programs?
So we used age and source a long time ago. I don't even remember the date when we would have started that. Probably not long after I would have started. So I would say in the 2006 to 2010 area, we just used age and source. And then the market got crazy and everything was worth a ton. Coming out of the 2010-11 drought, the markets just ran off and got pretty crazy. So we just didn't continue with them. Cattle were worth so much regardless of being in a program or not. So we kind of let all that go. And then probably 4 years ago, we re-enrolled the Colorado ranches into the age and source, all natural, and NHTC. As we seemed like we needed to separate ourselves from and add some value from just commodity cattle. So those programs we've been using about 4 years in Colorado, and then last year was our first year in Beef Care. And then Montana now has been 2 years in NHTC and age and source. And I'm in the middle of trying to get the Texas ranch enrolled in age and source and NHTC. Those cattle are not yet enrolled, but I'm in the process of doing that. So Colorado has been our longest stint in a program, and it's been 4 years in some form, and then this will be our second year in Beef Care.
Awesome. So, like you said, lots of flexibility with all the different programs you guys are involved in. So what have you seen since, I mean, you talked about Source and Age, you guys started in that program when it was pretty popular, and obviously a lot has changed since
Right.
just the Source and Age days. So what have you seen as the greatest benefit for being in programs?
Just the flexibility of marketing. If the premiums are not present, you're out a little bit of money on the front end, enrolling and auditing and things like that, but it's pretty minimal in the big scope of things. The amount of money you can put into a cow in a year, the money we spend on verifying is minimal. So even if premiums aren't overwhelming in a given year, it's no discount, obviously. But the biggest benefits are just the availability to put them into different markets. The they can go NHTC only, they can go all natural only, they can go combination of all, beef carrier on top of that. So there's just really no downside, because it didn't change a thing we do on any of our locations, other than just documentation got a little, I had to just keep track of what we do, but we did not change one management practice in order to fit into a program. So it didn't really change anything we do at all. It just gave us more options to then sell our product. So especially, to be totally honest, especially with Superior, if you can put those badges, the more badges you've got, or whatever they call the little deal at the, when your cattle are running through, it just helps to have, that just entices that many more buyers to get involved in the bidding process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I think that you touched on this. You didn't have to really change anything you were doing, and I think that's a misconception for a lot of producers when they're thinking about getting enrolled in programs. It's like, oh man, I'm going to have to change my management practices, and I'm going to have to do so many different things, and a lot of times that's not the case. You're already doing a lot of these things, and so now it's just going through the process of getting verified, and obviously, like you said, keeping records, sometimes better records, depending on how good of a record keeper you are prior. So I think that's a really great thing to highlight as well. Now I'm going to go to the flip side and ask you, what's been probably the most difficult part about participating in verification programs?
Uh, it sounds odd, but because of our dry climate, sometimes when you're in a program, you feel like you have to stay in it in order to get. So, like in a for an example, 3 summers ago, we got super dry and had to wean early. So I was weaning calves that weighed 250 pounds, and because they had buttons and they were enrolled in all these programs, and I had spent some money to get them there, I felt like I had to keep those calves in a program. Whereas if they'd have just been a set of calves unaffiliated, my decisions would have been easier to make as far as what to do with those calves coming off the cow that soon. So at the same time, it gives you some flexibility. Every once in a while, you can kind of feel a little pigeonholed into how to keep them enrolled. And in that particular instance, I ended up spending way more money to keep them in a program through finding feed yards that could, also keep them enrolled and those sorts of things, than I ever made back in the premium on them. But that's a real isolated incident, and I learned a lot from that. It was beneficial to have happen for my management skills to grow. But as far as, I mean, that's pretty unique, pretty specific instance where I was just kind of like, man, I almost wish I would have ignored the programs that those calves were enrolled in on that particular year. But the records that are required to be kept to be enrolled are beneficial to management decisions. So there's been no real downside to enrolling, and I mean that it's important to document what you doctor with and when you doctor them and how they responded to the treatment. It's important to keep track of your calving dates, and it incentivizes you to get bulls turned out right and get bulls picked up correctly and document that. And it tidies up so many more things in your ranch if you're actually paying attention and having to document them. It cleans your management up significantly. So I have not seen a real downside or a disadvantage to enrolling in these programs. I mean, you spend a little money, but the premiums make up for that and some. So
That's good to hear. I'm glad you didn't have a whole lot of things to look negative on for programs. And I think that, that's a good point to make. Your point of, you don't, yeah, you do spend the money. But if there's a scenario where it's not going to benefit you in the long run, then maybe you need to reevaluate and figure out what's the best option for you, especially like what you had to go through during that drought period, and trying to figure out what to do with those calves. So I think that's a great example. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about the beef care program and your experience with it. So can you kind of talk us through the process and the requirements and maybe how you felt, especially during the first year? I don't know if you've started with it into your second year yet, but kind of talk me through how you felt during that first time of the start to finish process of the beef care program.
Okay. When I first looked at the program, I thought this is going to be too much work to get audited, and the premium will have to be pretty overwhelming to be worth doing. As I dug in a little deeper, I realized that other than on a ranch, cowboys, we all know how to stay safe and what's risky and what's not. And so I've had meetings with employees, but I've never documented them. So there were little things like that I was like, well, I actually do this already. I just have to write down that I did it. So the things that seemed a little overwhelming or that would not be worth the efforts to change really weren't that significant. We already do grazing plans and resource management stuff that was real simple to just turn over and to the audit and see that it was satisfactory. The animal husbandry stuff is stuff that we strive for anyways, through our operation, and then the community and the employee and just the outreach stuff. While that maybe had been the only place that I had to maybe put in a few new wrinkles, those are good wrinkles to put in. So that they benefit the company as a whole. The process of being audited and being certified were not strenuous at all for us. It was just not a difficult process for us to get into beef care, and we're right now in the process of staying in beef care. This is our time of year that we kind of get re-enrolled and re-audited and get ready to go again. So it's not been an issue in year 2 either to stay enrolled. So I really, beef care I was not in any sort of program like it before. Beef care is the first verification of animal husbandry and range management that we've been in. So we were not in, I guess GAP would have been the other one. We were not in GAP. We didn't have to transfer from one to the other. So beef care was our first, but it's been simple for us.
Good. Well, so how did you, during like the phone interview process, how did you, I know that's one of those processes that producers maybe feel a little bit, I don't know, cautious is the right word, but a little leery of, just because it's going to take some time to sit through that and develop that quality manual. So,
Right.
how did you feel about that part of the process?
I didn't mind at all. but I just decided, like I try to decide everything, I was just going to answer every question honestly. And if it didn't fit the program, then that was fine. Then I just wouldn't be in the program. But I wasn't gonna exaggerate our management or say yes when I really meant no, or no when I really meant yes. I just answered the questions. And so if there was something that at the end of it that was told to me, well, all right, to be enrolled, we got to kind of improve here, or not do this or not do that, then that's the decision I was going to make when that time came. But the phone interview and getting the manual built, it didn't seem like I had to work very hard at all at that. I just answered questions, and IMI took care of the hard part of that. The audit took longer than a normal audit just because we had to look at more stuff, but that still wasn't difficult. We just verified that what I said we do, we actually do. And so I just wasn't concerned with if we did something incorrect, trying to not reveal that. We just did what we do, and then we were either approved or we weren't, and that was how I approached that. So I wasn't going to let it change what we do from a management or a strategy standpoint, and it turned out what we do fits the program, so we were good to go. And then the places that I did need to improve on, like I said earlier, were places that were legitimately needed improvement, and I agreed with those areas. So it was not like I didn't have to go kicking and screaming changing something. I was just like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I should do a better job here or there, and that's what we did.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of another, you kind of touched on the on-site portion, it does take a little bit longer when including that audit in there, but it's truly just verifying kind of everything you talked about during the phone interview. So I think that's
Right.
a really important thing to highlight as well, because that's a common question with producers that are in the process of starting the beef care program and just saying, okay, well, what happens during the on-site audit? Well, that's just verifying everything that you discussed during the phone interview. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. So CARE, I mean, as you know, is intended to help producers tell their story to consumers. And I know you've done the Story Bit series, and you kind of discussed some of these things, but what would you want a consumer to know about your family and your guys' operation?
Probably that we do care, and that's not a play on words. We do care what the consumer wants. I mean, we're providing a product that we're hoping to make a living off of, and if we're not providing what people want, then it's not going to work. We're not going to stay in business. So it's important that we know what is desired and how we can do that to fit the needs of consumers. So I would want them to know that we do care what they think and what they want, and what the product is they're willing to buy, and what they're willing to maybe pay more for, because it's exactly what they want. And so we want to build our business to provide the product that they desire, and that secondly, and I think this is maybe a little over exaggerated, but there are ranges that are used and overused, and there are times in dry conditions that you're left with little choice. But for the most part, ranchers are range stewards. It's the only way to stay in business is to manage your resource properly. So while there's several different strategies of accomplishing that, the goal is the same, and that is to maintain your ranch, your range conditions, the environment sustainably. So while there are exceptions, the majority of ranchers have conservation to some degree as part of their plan, because if you don't, you won't be in business for very long. So while there may be, well, like I said, there are exceptions to that, of course, but I would want consumers to know that ranchers care for their land and for their animals, because without either, you're not in business. And even beyond that, they are creation like we are, and they deserve to be cared for and stewarded well. So we are given that charge to care for what we've been given to steward well, and so we do our very best. We make mistakes, obviously, we're human, but our intent is to steward well, and both land and animal and humans, our employees, our coworkers, our communities. So that's our objective, and making a living is the goal to provide for our families, but we have to do all those things in order to stay in this business.
I think that's a beautiful answer, actually.
Oh,
I
good.
think that's a common misconception, that consumers don't truly understand that, you work very hard to take care of the environment just as well, if not better at times, than the cattle. And because, like you said, if you don't take care of that source, then you're not going to be able to stay in business, and there's no essentially grazing opportunity, food source for the cattle in general. So
Right.
I think that's, that's a broad term of it. I mean, it includes water, and obviously you're taking care of wildlife as well, and keeping, their well-being in mind. And I think that's another thing that people don't think about, is that, you care about the wildlife just as much as anybody, and making sure that you're creating a sustainable living space for whatever wildlife is in your area. So I think that that's a really important thing to talk about. So, Andy, so my last question is, if you were to give any advice to a producer looking to get enrolled in verification programs, what would you tell them?
That if you keep general records and keep track of your business adequately, programs are not going to change much of what you do. If you're a good record keeper, and that's an important part of your job, is to keep track of what's happening, verification programs won't be a hindrance at all, just an addition. And that the flexibilities they provide you in marketing are well worth the initial costs or the added time spent keeping records. But if you're keeping track of your business just in order to pay taxes and pay the banker back, you're going to have to step up your game on record keeping. But if you're keeping track of what's happening in your ranch in order to better manage your ranch in the future, verification programs just add to that. There's not going to be anything you have to step up in workload to be enrolled in a program, because you're already doing it. And if you're not doing those things, kind of behind the times on management, because you got to know what's going on. And it's what our consumers want, and it's what they demand, and ultimately they have the say here, because if nobody's buying it, what point is it in raising it? So we need to listen to them.
I think that's a good point. And I think that's something that many producers can forget at times, is that, yes, you're raising a product, but you're raising it to feed other people, and knowing what they want and what their needs are from a buying standpoint is very important. So I think that's a good point to make. So awesome.
Yep.
Well, Andy, those are all my questions. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule. I know This is a crazy time of year, and there's a lot going on your end. So thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me. If you all who are watching have any questions on anything that Andy and I spoke about, please feel free to give IMI Global a call at 303-895-3002, or you can check out our website. There's a wealth of information there. You can also see the Welch Cattle Company story bit. It's on our website. So if you want to see more of Andy and his family and learn more about their operation, that's a good place to start. So thanks again, Andy, and we will talk to you guys later.
Okay, thank you.